Here we are with sub-element G2, operating procedures, 5 exam questions in 5 groups. Which sideband? Oh, and I hope all of you had a chance to look at the AM and FM videos. That will help you with this. It's not essential to passing the test, but it might help you with understanding what we're talking about here with the various modulation. Anyway, which sideband is most commonly used for voice communications on frequencies of 14 megahertz and higher? And the questions here, or answers, are upper sideband, lower sideband, vestigial sideband, and double sideband. The answer for this is upper sideband. And what that means when you apply amplitude modulation to a carrier, normally you have the carrier, which is the long line here in the center, and you generate a lower sideband, and you also generate an upper sideband. This one is in frequency. This is below the carrier, and this in frequency is above the carrier. Now, if you look at these two sidebands, you'll see that they are symmetrical. They contain exactly the same information on the two sides of the carrier. Okay, so when you transmit both of them, you're transmitting redundant information. And also, the carrier itself contains no information at all. It's just there. So when you generate single sideband, you take out the carrier and you take off the sideband you don't want, and here we have upper sideband remaining. The carrier is gone, the lower sideband is gone, and we can use all of the transmitter power to transmit this information that is in the upper sideband. All right? Now, what the question specifically asks is which one do you use on frequencies of 14 megahertz or higher? It's the upper sideband. Just for a hint for you, you're going to see this vestigial sideband a few times in here. It is never the right answer. So don't fall for that one. But in this case, we're after upper sideband here. It's amateur practice for sideband to use upper sideband on 9 megahertz and above 9 megahertz, lower sideband below 9 megahertz. And the reason for this is historical. The early sideband generators produced the upper sideband at 9 megahertz. And when this was converted up to higher frequencies, the sideband remained unchanged. It stayed upper sideband. But when the 9 megahertz upper sideband was converted down to the lower frequencies, the sideband inverted to lower sideband. So that's how the custom developed to use upper sideband on the upper frequencies, lower sideband on the lower frequencies, with 9 megahertz being the split point. Modern ham equipment can generate either sideband, either place. It's no longer really a technical issue. It's more an issue of common practice. But now we have the exception in the 60-meter band at 5 megahertz that the FCC says you will use upper sideband in the 60-meter band by regulation there. Which sideband is used is not a subject of FCC regulation except in that one band, but the amateur practice, the custom is to use upper, above 9 megahertz, lower, below 9 megahertz. Which of the following modes is most commonly used for voice communications on the 160, 75, and 40-meter bands? This is below 9 megahertz, so the answer is going to be lower sideband. Frequency lower than 9 megahertz means lower sideband. If you know the bands, then you shouldn't have any trouble with that. Which of the following is most commonly used for single sideband communications in the VHF and UHF bands? It's above 9 megahertz. It will be the upper sideband. Which mode is most commonly used for voice communications on the 17 and 12-meter bands? It's above 9 megahertz. It's upper sideband. Which mode of voice communication is most commonly used on the high-frequency amateur bands? The answer here is single sideband. Which of the following is an advantage when using single sideband as compared to other analog voice modes on the HF amateur bands? The advantage is you use less bandwidth. Remember, we cut that one sideband off, and we have higher power efficiency because we're transmitting the information in the one sideband, and we're not wasting any transmitter power transmitting a carrier which contains no information. Which of the following statements is true for the single sideband voice mode? Only one sideband is transmitted. The other sideband and the carrier are suppressed. And here you see the picture again. Here's double sideband with the carrier, and here's the single sideband that we transmit. The carrier is gone. The redundant sideband is gone. And we just transmit this one sideband with its information. Which of the following is a recommended way to break into a conversation when using phone? Now, if you have the sheet of cue signals, go ahead and grab that, because we're going to have some cue signals here for a few questions. The best way to break into an existing conversation when you're using phone is to say your call sign during a break between transmissions between other stations. Hopefully they'll take a breath and give you a chance to get in there. A lot of times when they're sitting there talking to each other, you don't have much of a chance. Why do most amateur stations use lower sideband on the 160, 75, and 40 meter bands? The correct answer is it's the current amateur practice. There's no technical reason for it. It's just the current amateur practice. Which of the following statements is true of single sideband Vox operation? Vox is shorthand for voice operation. And what happens with Vox operation is your transmitter, or your radio, your transceiver sits there receiving, and then when you speak, it changes to transmit. Okay? So it allows hands-free operation. I personally don't like Vox because you can have room noise or outside noise or something like that trip your transmitter, or you could say something that should not go on the air, but it will. What does the expression CQDX usually indicate? It means the caller is looking for any station outside their own country. In ham talk, CQ means calling any station. You can think of it as seek you. DX is ham talk for distance, usually meaning a foreign country. Out here in Hawaii, we're DX for everybody, except other Hawaiian stations.